There's a game tonight that's going to bring millions of people together in front of the TV. It's not a final, it's not a semi-final, it's not even a knockout match. But it could become one of the most watched matches of the entire opening match day of the 2026 World Cup. Because today the United States makes its debut, one of the hosts, one of the countries under the most pressure in this World Cup. And facing them will be Paraguay, a team returning to the World Cup after many years of absence and arriving with huge excitement. But pay attention, because if you're watching this video, you've probably come here because of a very tough question. Where can you watch United States versus Paraguay live? What time does it play in your country? On which channel is it being broadcast? Because millions of fans still have doubts. And be careful, because depending on the country you live in, the time changes completely. So stay until the end, because we're going to go over all the schedules for Latin America, all the official TV channels, the possible lineups, the full group, the latest updates on the match, and why this game could be much more evenly matched than many people think. Because yes, the United States is the favorite, but watch out for Paraguay, be very careful, because there's something a lot of people are overlooking. When people talk about the United States, they talk about Christian Pulisic, they talk about playing at home, they talk about the pressure of being the host. They talk about Mauricio Pochettino, but almost no one is talking about the real danger. Gustavo Alfaro, the Paraguayan coach, a manager who has already shown on several occasions that he knows how to compete in this type of tournament. And that makes Paraguay a much tougher opponent than they seem. But before we get into the analysis, let's go over the information everyone is looking for. What time does the United States play against Paraguay? Take note, Argentina 10 p.m., Paraguay 10 p.m. Brazil 10 o'clock p.m. Venezuela 9 o'clock p.m. Colombia 8 o'clock p.m. Ecuador 8 o'clock p.m. Panama 8 o'clock p.m. Mexico 7 o'clock p.m. Guatemala 7 o'clock p.m. El Salvador 7 o'clock p.m. Costa Rica 7 o'clock p.m. Honduras 7 o'clock p.m. Puerto Rico 9 o'clock p.m. Canada Toronto 9 o'clock p.m. Cuba 9 o'clock p.m. Spain, 3 o'clock a.m. Many Spanish fans will be up late to watch, but since it's a World Cup host debut at 3 o'clock a.m., it's worth it. Now then, knowing the time is useless if you don't know where to watch it. And here, 12 o'clock a.m., one of the most important parts of the video. Because television rights change depending on the country. In the United States, it can be watched on Fox, FS1, Fox 1, Telemundo, Universo, and Peacock. In Mexico, it will be available on Canal 5, Azteca 7, TUDN, and ViX. In Argentina, it can be watched on Telefe, TIC Sports, D Sports, DGO, and associated platforms. In Colombia, it will be available on Caracol, RCN, Caracol Play, D Sports, and DGO. In Ecuador on Teleamazonas, D Sports, and DGO. In Paraguay on 13 Unicanal, Gen TV, and Tigo Sports. In Spain on RTV, RTV Play, and DAZN. So there are no more excuses. Right now you know exactly where to watch the match from practically anywhere in the world. But wait, because there's something even more interesting. The group that the United States and Paraguay are in, because this match could completely determine the future of both in the tournament. The United States shares a group with Paraguay, Australia, and Turkey, and that means that starting off with a win can be absolutely decisive. Because when we analyze the World Cups, many times the team that wins the first match ends up qualifying. and the one who loses is forced to struggle throughout the whole tournament. That's why the pressure on the United States is enormous. Not only because they're playing at home, not only because they're the hosts, but because they know that a defeat in their opening match would cause a media earthquake. And that's exactly where Paraguay could come in. A team that arrives without pressure, with no expectations, and with a lot to gain. Now let's talk about the possible lineups, because there could also be surprises here. The United States could start with Matt Turner, Dest, Richards, Ream, Robinson, McKennie, Adams, Musa, Pulisic, Way, and Balogun. A team with a lot of rhythm, a lot of speed, and players who compete every week in Europe. Damn! Meanwhile, Paraguay could respond with Gatito Fernandez, Caceres, Balbuena, Alderete, Espinosa, Cubas, Galarza, Almiron, Enciso, Sosa, Sanabria, and keep an eye on two names, Miguel Almiron and Julio Enciso, because they could be the players who could change the game for Paraguay. And there's actually a fact about them, one that very few people know, because when everyone talks about Christian Pulisic, when everyone talks about Balogun, when everyone talks about the pressure on the United States, there's a Paraguayan footballer who can change everything, Julio Enciso. And watch out, because we're talking about one of the most talented players in all of South America, Julio Enciso, a footballer capable of creating a goal out of nothing, a player who doesn't need to dominate the match to be decisive. And that's exactly what worries Pochettino the most, because the United States knows they'll probably have more possession, more of the ball, more initiative. But they also know that Paraguay can punish any mistake. And in a World Cup, a single mistake can decide everything. Now then, there's another factor that can have a huge influence on this match. The pressure, because it seems like an advantage to play at home, and many times it is. But it can also become a problem, because the whole country will be watching the United States. Millions of fans, millions. Waiting for a victory, waiting for a great performance, waiting for a team capable of competing with the best in the world. And that creates an enormous responsibility. In fact, the United States comes to this World Cup with one of the highest levels of pressure in its recent history. As the host and sharing a group with Paraguay, Australia, and Turkey, there's a sense that advancing is practically mandatory. That's why the matches, the first few minutes can be crucial. Because if the United States scores early, the match can open up completely. But if the minutes go by and Paraguay holds on, nerves can start to show. And speaking of nerves, there's something that many fans still don't know. This Group D is probably one of the most open groups in the entire World Cup. There's no historical powerhouse like Brazil. There's no team like France. There's no Argentina. There's no Spain. And that means anyone can finish first. Anyone. The United States is the favorite because they're playing at home. But Paraguay comes in after a spectacular qualifying campaign, in which they achieved very important victories. And they went on a long unbeaten streak. That's why this match is worth much more than just 3 points. It can completely determine the future of the group. Now let's go to the latest weather update, because it can also be important. The forecasts point to a pleasant night in Los Angeles. Mild temperatures, no rain expected. And with practically perfect conditions for playing football, that means we'll see both teams competing at the highest physical level. And this could especially benefit the United States, because one of the great strengths of Pochettino's team is precisely the intensity, the ability to press, the ability to run. The ability to maintain a very high pace for 90 minutes. But be careful, because Paraguay has always felt comfortable in physical matches. Always. And that can lead to a much more even match than many people expect. Now imagine this scenario, the 70th minute. Tie on the scoreboard, the whole stadium pushing, more than 70,000 people cheering for the United States, and Paraguay holding on, because that's exactly where the unexpected heroes of the World Cup usually appear, and every World Cup has one, always. A soccer player no one expected, a man who suddenly becomes a global protagonist. And who knows if tonight it could be Enciso, or Almiron, or Balogun, or Pulisic, because that's precisely what makes a World Cup so special. You never know who's going to write history. United States versus Paraguay, first match day of the 2026 World Cup. In Los Angeles, with millions of viewers watching, schedules confirmed for all of Latin America, and official broadcast on Fox, Telemundo, Peacock, and Channel 5. Azteca, 2DN ViX, Telefe, Taichi Sports, Caracol, RCN, 13 Unicanal, Tigo Sports, Arte, VE, Daven, and the rest of the official broadcasters according to each country, because tonight is not just a match. The World Cup dream begins for two national teams, and in a few hours, we'll know who lands the first big blow in Group D, and who leaves Los Angeles with the feeling of being one step closer to making history.